Alright, so this is a simple logo. I'm just going to create another file. Okay, right, so this is another layout. And the same thing, I'm just going to add the guides because it makes life easier when we do have guides like that. 50% smack in the center like that. And then horizontal. Okay, alrighty. And I'm going to create a circle in the center of this. Circle that coincides with the center of our guide, right? The intersection of our guide, just like that. Right, so I have that. Right. Now, sometimes we want a line to appear like that, meaning to say that in a way, this particular circle is some sort of a guide as well, right? But once I click outside like this, for example, it will be gone. So how do I make it so that this remains? I can actually change it and change it into a path. So I'm just going to go here, add, sorry, is it select? Okay. So with that circle, I'm just going to change it to a path. So it won't appear in the layer section here, right? But if I click on, you actually have several options here, layers, channels, and path. If I click on path, I will see that selection, right? And I can make it visible or invisible. Now I can go back to the background layer and get rid of that circle. But if I want it to appear, if I want to use it, I can go to path and make that visible. And so I'll have that circle, which is not really part of my image. Alrighty. Now we'll then just have another layer, or rather, okay, this is something rather interesting to some at least. When or if you create, you might have noticed already, when or if you create a layer for text, or rather when or if you want to add text, right? What happens is that once you start typing, let's say text at the bottom. I'm just going to add this text towards the bottom of my circle just now, right? But once you create a text layout like this, meaning to say that once you edit in text, automatically a layer will be added, right? And why so? It's because for the most part, your layout will be in bitmap format. Hopefully you still remember from computing principles, right? We have bitmap and vector, right? So text is a form of a vector. Can remember? Yeah, I see some smiles, right? So text is a vector, meaning to say that with regards to text, right? If we have this text and we scale it, however much we want to scale it, right? It remains sharp. So that is text. Okay, this might not be that sharp, right? But it should, because what happens is that all of these texts are created using some sort of mathematical equation. So it's actually a set shape. So regardless of how you distort it, how you rescale it, it will remain sharp like that, right? But that is not to be said for other elements of your graphic design. So anyhow, now I'm going to use this path, make it visible, right? And I'm just gonna put this text on that path. So I'm just gonna right click here and I'm just gonna select a text along path, right? Now you see that the text is within that path, right? But that said, this text is still not really a text yet, meaning to say that we don't really see it anywhere inside our layers, meaning to say it's still a path like this, right? So hopefully you still remember from yesterday when we did the yesterday or maybe last week when we did the path tool, and then we turn it into a selection so that we can then manipulate it, color it and stuff. So you can do that. So I'm just gonna right click here and choose path to selection. Now as you can see, the text is starting to blink, meaning to say the outline now becomes like shapes that we can manipulate. Right, so I'm just going to manipulate that by just inserting color like this. But before that, I'm just going to create a layer, Shift Control N, bottom text, like this, right? And then I'm just, you can use the paint bucket, or you can use the edit and fill with foreground color. Foreground color here is black, right? Then you can just make the path invisible, right? So we have text at the bottom, which is not at the bottom currently, right? But of course, since we already have this layer, we can then manipulate it and, for example, rotate it like this. Just make sure that this center of the rotation should be at the center of your guide as well, right? So you rotate it until you get it at the bottom there, right? So you have text at the bottom, just like that. Right, so if you have like extra 1 or 2 guides, it might help you here, because I'm not entirely sure how much we should rotate. But I'm just gonna click that. Let's say that's an OK, right? Then I'm just gonna have this text again. I'm just gonna edit that. Right, so instead of text at the bottom, now we'll just add top text or something. Right, because as you may have guessed, we're going to have another text that we are going to have over on the path, right? So right click and text along path. Oopsie, sorry. I think it's because that happened because I am selecting this, meaning I'm selecting this particular path, the path with the text, so it actually goes along this path, right? So I should select this path and then do the same thing, text along path. Okay, the problem with this is now we have the top text going like this, and we don't want the top text to appear upside down like that, right? So that's not what we want. So I'm just going to delete that first. Delete this path. Delete path, right? And I'm going to do something fairly strange here, which is to flip this. So this is the flip tool, right? And I'm going to flip the path, right? So this is layer, this is selection, this is path. I'm going to flip this path. So I'm just going to go and just select this path, and you'll see that nothing happens. Nothing happens because the path is just nicely like that, right? So when you flip it, it's actually we are flipping this circle, right? Yeah, if that makes sense. Alright, then select layer again, because the default should be layer. Alright, then I'm just gonna again do that same thing, text along path, right? But now the top text goes like that. Alternatively, of course, you can do that first, then flip the text. That works too, right? But now that I have this, I'll do the same thing, which is right click here, path to selection, and then create another layer called Shift Control N for new layer, top text. Right, I'm just gonna make the text layer invisible, and then I'm just gonna fill the selection with foreground color. Right, then I'm just gonna make that layer, that path invisible. So now I have that top text. Go back to layer, to the top text. I can then manipulate it like that. Some part of it is invisible. That's okay. I can move it later. Right? You can just move it like that. Right? By the way, right now I'm using the arrow button, so that's why the text is moving. All right. The top text doesn't look that curvy because the text is very, very short, so it doesn't look that curvy, right? Then I'm just gonna make this path invisible as well. So as you can guess, I can then, for example, create something like a logo inside here and have that text outside like that, right? So I can have this Shift Control N. I'm gonna create a new layer called the logo base or something, right? Then manipulate that, maybe with a pattern fill like that, right? Then I can go ahead and manipulate this so that I have a different kind of logo, right? So this is